You currently have a mortgage, you're living in your house, but you've decided that maybe you want to go to a bigger house, or maybe you need some new features. Maybe you want to go live out with some acreage or something like that. And you're not exactly sure how to sell the current house and buy a new home. How does that work? I have Greg Hall here with me today from Caliber Home Loans, and he is going to walk us through some of the options, and we're going to brainstorm some ideas to help you if you are looking kind of to do both the selling and the buying. Because many of you have probably purchased a home, right? But you haven't done the selling part yet. Greg and I have worked together for 10 years, and he's been in the business for 20 maybe, 20 something. 20 something. So he has a lot of great options for us. Greg, do you see this kind of thing happen quite a bit where people have a house to sell and looking for one to purchase as well?
Yeah, it happens. So when it comes to buying before selling, we do that. We do see that. So really what it boils down to in the cases that I personally worked on is the buyer has to be in a financial position where they can qualify with both house payments. So they own the current home, which they intend to sell, but they don't want to do it before they've purchased a new home. Some people do that for convenience. It's easier to move at their own pace, etc. So these buyers need to be in a position where they can qualify with both the old house payment and the new house payment. So as long as their debt to income ratio is okay with both payments, then we can move forward and go that route. The second piece of it is the buyer having enough funds to put at least a minimal down payment down on the new house, or the minimum down payment and closing costs, or whatever their funds due at closing is going to be. So as long as they can handle that and the debt to income ratio is fine, then they're in a position where they can buy the new house before they sell the current home.
So before we got on here, we talked about some options. So let's say you've gone back to your lender, the mortgage person that you worked with to buy your home, and you've decided that both your debt to income works out to afford two different homes. And like you said, you have enough down payment money to put down the minimum amount. Once those two things are determined, right, then what are some options after you understand that that's a doable thing? That's what you need to do first. Talk to the lender, talk to a mortgage person, find out if that's what's doable.
So what the process is once they do that, and let's say that they've got the new home, that they've closed on the new home, and then they list the old home for sale, and then clients get their proceeds from the sale of the original home. Then what I've had clients do is take some or all of those proceeds from the sale, and then they apply it as a principal payment on the new loan. And then we do what's called a recast, which a recast is basically re-amortizing or recalculating the payment based on the new lower principal balance after they've made their principal reduction payment. So that's one way to go.
Yeah, so they're purchasing the home with maybe just a minimum down payment, something like 5%, 10%. And then once it sells, you readjust everything. So
Right.
When you initially do that and you put down 10%, they always make you do the kind of PMIs or that mortgage insurance. So is there a time period between when you started the original loan and then when you can do the recast? Is there any type of time?
No, there's no limit. It can be done at any time. The cases that I've had, again, they put down a 5% down payment on the new loan, sold, had their proceeds from the sale. In one case that I've just done recently, they made enough of a principal payment to reduce, to where they did not need PMI anymore. So as part of the recast, the PMI was removed from the payment as well. So again, the new payment's based on lower principal balance, and then also removed the PMI. So it was kind of a double win once they made that move, did that.
Right. So that's one option where you can kind of take all your proceeds and put it towards the new home, which a lot of people, that's, I think, kind of what people think would be the first option. But we've worked with a couple people that have done things a little bit differently as well. So run through one of those other
Yeah,
options.
so you and I worked with a mutual client who knew she was going to sell. She knew she didn't want to go, didn't want to have to time things perfectly where she sold and bought at the exact same time. She was concerned about whether she would find the house that she wanted once her house was under contract. So what she ended up doing was, again, ahead of time, and if you're going to go this route, probably the earlier the better, but she did what's called a home equity line of credit to access some of the equity from her current home. So basically she pulled out the equity before selling, used some of those funds to prep the house for sale, and then she ended up having some things come up in her inspection that she needed to do some repairs on the house. So she had that money from the home equity line of credit to do those repairs, and then she also used that money to provide the down payment and cover closing costs on the new purchase. So again, if you don't have enough money in the bank, but you've got equity, you can access some of that equity ahead of time by doing a home equity loan. And that worked out pretty well in her case.
Yeah. And I think right now, if you've purchased your home several years ago, you actually have quite a bit of equity just by the natural appreciation of prices. So people have more equity sometimes than they think.
Yes.
And
it's been a good few years for property values. So
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then a third option where you can kind of take some of those proceeds, and you don't necessarily, like, it's maybe not the most advantageous for you to put it all back into your payment for your new home.
Right.
I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but there are other options as well where it can actually benefit you.
Yes, and again, I've had clients do this. I do have a client who's in the process of selling, and he's going to have a pretty significant amount of proceeds from the sale of his current home. And he asked me, he's like, hey, if I put $100,000 towards the new mortgage that I just took, what's it going to do to my payment? And it was, his monthly payment's going to drop somewhere between $600 and $700 a month. And he'll likely do that because he doesn't have much other items in the way of debts. But I've had other clients who figured out, they're undetermined, and decided that it was more valuable to them to use some of the proceeds and eliminate other debt rather than reduce their mortgage debt. Because when you look at all your payments, your mortgage is typically going to be the cheapest, the most advantageous type of debt that you have. So in one case that I can remember, buyers put down a minimal down payment on the new house. I had about $50,000 in proceeds from the sale and used that basically to wipe their slate clean, and they saved significantly more money by getting rid of their personal debt, consumer debt, credit card debt. I mean, eliminating that was way more advantageous to them than reducing their mortgage balance by $50,000. So they ended up having overall payment on the new, bigger, twice as big a house. Their overall outgo was less than it was with the old house and all the other miscellaneous debt. So when you have some proceeds, it's a matter of sitting down with somebody that you trust and just looking at the overall financial picture and determining what's the best way to use that money.
And I think that's really important. I think that's one of the things that you bring to the table that I really like, is that you have the ability to look at that picture, and you stay in contact with all of your clients, and that relationship is something that's long term. It's not just let's buy a house and I never see you again. You're helping people with the bigger picture.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
And your goal is also, I think we talked about this before, I mean, you would love to see people pay off their mortgage. And
Oh, we have, yeah. I've had several clients, again, as time goes on, more and more clients have actually paid off their mortgages. So I've kind of worked myself out of a job, which is great. I mean, that's the ultimate goal for some of these clients is, listen, let's get that thing paid off. One that I can think of right now, they paid off their house and they sold their business and they're retired. So, that was the end game for them. That's what we've been working for 15 or so years that I've been working with them.
So a broker or lender can really play a lot of roles. I think people don't always realize that it can be a bigger picture.
Yes. Yeah. And again, a good mortgage lender will not only help you get into debt, but will be there to help you get out of debt as well. And, and when you need other financial professionals, again, as a mortgage lender, I have the most complete picture of a borrower's overall finances. I know their income, I know their savings, I know their retirement balances, I know their credit. And so, when the time comes, we can refer If they need help with taxes, we can refer a CPA, we can refer a financial advisor, we can refer, insurance people, we can refer, family will attorneys.
Real estate agents.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and real estate agents, of course, yes.
So we kind of went over the scenario where somebody owns a house and their debt to income is low enough, they have enough maybe equity in their home where they can sell their home first, purchase a home first and then sell their home. So that's not always the case, right? Sometimes people don't have that option to purchase first and then sell. But we also have worked with clients who've made this work as well, right? Where you can do it at the same time, and or maybe you sell your house first. That's what a lot of people, especially in this market, people sometimes will sell their house first. So what are some options, or what have you kind of seen also with people who sell their house first and then go to purchase?
Right. Yeah, because it's not always an option. Sometimes the debt to income ratio doesn't work, right? They just can't do it with 2 house payments, or they really need all of the proceeds from the sale of their home to make it work with the new home. And so, in those scenarios, basically they have no choice but to sell first. But there's some creative ways to do that. I had one just recently. Sold her home, and then part of the reason she selected the offer she did, they allowed her to stay in the house rent-free for almost 30 days. And so that bought her more time to find a new home. And so again, it's a seller's market, so you may find a buyer that's willing and able to allow you to stay in the home for a little while longer, even after the sale is closed, or they may have an extended closing timeline. So either way, that helps a seller, because then they know how much their proceeds are going to be, and then they can go find the new home.
Right. And so you mentioned in this scenario that they were able to stay in the home longer after it closed. We can do a kind of a rent buyback. So maybe, let's say we're May 1st and the house closes at the end of May, but you need it through June and July as well. There's sometimes a rent buyback where the seller can rent from the buyers. Maybe they don't need to move in. I have some buyers right now that still have a lease through the end of July, and so they don't need to be out before then. So that's another. It's not always free, just to put that out there, but you can rent it back, and then that gives you an opportunity to go out and have some time to buy a house. Because if you've sold before, if you have your proceeds, it makes you more desirable as a buyer if you don't have anything to sell. There's very few houses being sold contingent on your house selling. It's happening, but not as much as it was before. So we also have somebody who rented an Airbnb, right?
Yes, I had a nice lady that owned a condo in Denver, and she had traveled back and forth to Kansas City, several times, trying to do some house shopping. Of course, that this was at a time when homes were going on the market, and then within 24 hours or so, they were off the market. And so it was a little frustrating for her because, something came on, she wanted to see it, then she didn't have time to get here. So she made the decision to sell her condo in Denver, which it sold quickly, sold for over asking price, which, the advantage of that was she knew how much money she had to work with on the purchase. And then what she did was she basically loaded her stuff up, or had somebody load it up, and she put the things that she needed in her car with her cat, and drove to Kansas City and rented an Airbnb. I can't remember if it was 35 days or 45 days, but basically did a kind of a midterm rent on an Airbnb, and found a house that she fell in love with, got her offer accepted, and then moved in. So that was another way to do it, is just sell the house, find some temporary housing, and then keep looking and find the house that you want. And again, it did put her in a good position because she knew exactly how much money she had to work with, and
she could close quickly.
Yes.
And all those things. So she had some flexibility.
Exactly.
It seems like the last option for a lot of people is, there's the Airbnb option, or live in the house, try to do kind of a rent buyback. And then sometimes we just have to move in with friends or family.
I've got some people doing that as we speak, and they're fine with it. The family's okay with it, and they're okay with moving in with one of their children. actually.
Yeah.
So that's a way to do it as well. If you've got some place that you can stay for a little while you find the new house, then that works as well.
Right.
Maybe you can move in with your real estate agent. Family, yeah.
I'm gonna start renting out my basement for those clients who can't find a house and need to.
Yeah.
I need to own a storage unit place maybe as well. That'd be great. So there are options, and again, I think it's important to have these conversations as early as possible with your mortgage lender, with a real estate agent, just kind of to brainstorm some ideas, see what options are available for you and your situation. So any last thoughts on any of this, Greg?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Again, I've met people that didn't realize, or they weren't asked by their lender, or weren't told by the lender that, hey, you've got these options. You can qualify with both payments. And again, not that they want to have two house payments for any longer than they have to, but it's an option. And so you don't have to make a contingent offer, which is most likely not going to be accepted. So I've talked to people who didn't know that there was such a thing as a recast, and that's something that not all lenders do. So maybe that's why they hadn't heard about it. It was the lender they were working with previously didn't offer that. So again, I think it's important to work with somebody who will give you all the options, and then you can pick the one that's going to work best for you.
Totally agree. Well, thank you so much for being on here again with me. Greg and I have a couple videos, so feel free to check those out. He's got a lot of great information out there. And remember, you deserve to love where you live.